Hi, everyone. It's Justin Baker Rojas, Director of Communications for the International Visual Literacy Association, IVLA, and thanks for being here with us again for one of our talks and another keynote session leading up to our 57th annual conference, which this year is taking place in Aguascalientes, Mexico. And I'd like to introduce to you our host for this year's conference, who's going to talk a little bit more about that, Ricardo Lopez Leon. Thanks for being here, Ricardo. Tell us a little bit about briefly with a theme and what we're looking forward to at the conference this year.
Thank you, Justin. I am very excited to welcome everyone from IVLA in Aguascalientes. We are talking about the role of images, the power of images in festive and sacred practices. So we are doing the conference within the Day of the Dead celebration. So it will be really powerful. We will have a lot of symbolism, a lot of color, a lot of tradition. So it will be great. Everybody should come.
Great. And then we have a special guest with us today, Ricardo. And who would you like to introduce to us today, who's going to talk a little bit more about their work in this conference field?
Yes, I am very glad that Marita Ibañez Sandoval accepted our invitation to talk about her work. And she is from Peru, but she is all over the world, and she's now on the other side. She's in Japan. She's a Ph.D. candidate in the University of Tsukuba, and she works at the intersection of photomedia, landscapes, and visual literacy using visual participatory methods to study migration and landscape transformation. So, her work is being recognized internationally. She has presented in Asia, Europe, and the Americas. So, welcome. Thank you for accepting our invitation. And please tell us a little bit about the work you are doing.
Thank you very much, Ricardo and Justin. Thank you so much for the invitation and the opportunity to share my work with you guys and with all the IVLA people. So my current research that is part of my PhD dissertation is called Mending Landscapes. It's a study of participatory photo-mediated methods and community belonging among Latin American migrants in Yosu. So, as a Latina myself, I'm Peruvian here in Japan. My work has been engaging with Latin American communities from Ibaraki prefecture. That it's not probably one of the most famous communities in Japan. And we have been working together with participatory photo-mediated methods, photo walks, photo elicitation, and collective photomontage to talk about the experience of being a migrant in Japan, to talk about the overlooked situations and representation in media also. And that started just like me trying to find some Peruvian food and finished in 5 years of research here in Japan. So I'm really looking forward to talk more about it with you guys today.
Great. And I read, Marita, a little bit about your work. And what intrigues me is that and we're seeing a lot of this work happening now where visual literacy is extending beyond just the two-dimensional visuals, but actually going deeper into the human experience metaphysically in some senses. And I know that the work that you're doing is you talk about the physical action of photographics or images that relate to the human beings also in some ways, like the idea of mending or coming together or separation and playing with those ideas with visuals, but how it could pertain to a culture or to a way of disconnection and reconnection, those kinds of things. So could you talk a little bit about how you came up with that idea in your work with the people that you're talking about here?
So thank you. So I think although mending is a word that I started using through this research since the last 5 years, I think that has been something like that has been building up like maybe from the last 15 years. So I have always been interested in migration, coming from a very diverse country myself, where I'm from Lima, that is Peru's capital city. And there has happened like a lot of internal migration there. So, for example, I'm first generation from that city. So that's something that has always been with me. But living the migrant experience myself and coming, from the other side of the world, as Ricardo mentioned, opened me a different point of view, about belonging that comes not only with cultural differences, but with language ability, for example. Um, and through my work, I have been working before in photomontage, but in different ways, more like assembling things, trying to mediate stories with different materials. But that changed here when I started like going closer to photomedia practice, but also, understanding what it meant. So mending is used here not as a metaphor, because that term is used a lot in, for example, medical sciences, as a metaphor, to join things. But here is more like analogy of, mending your own identity, because migration sort of brings that, kind of trying to have like an equilibrium between your identity from your parents or your family, of your histories and stories, and now this new land, this host land where you are, and how do you embrace these changes while keeping true to yourself. So that's something that we transit and negotiate like every day, individually and as a community. So in that sense, my approach to the community itself, I didn't want to create this distance, like, researcher and participants. And I was very weary, because we have this sort of cliche that we need to be so neutral and, kind of cold, if we want to talk about it like that, with the people that we are studying in a way. And I thought that, for me at least, that doesn't work. And because I'm naturally social, I like having conversations. I'm having a blast today with you guys. So I thought, like, talking about an experience that I also share, although I always acknowledge with immense privilege, because the situation that I'm here in Japan is probably very different than most of Latin Americans here. I'm coming from an academic context, and most of Latin American here are coming for work in a different environment with different access, that the own experience brings with it. So I decided actually to embrace that, the opportunity to be close to them and to be able to speak the same language. So I decided to start this more as a workshop, in a place that I wouldn't come with all the answers or like with solution of this, but more like we can interchange knowledge. So I will bring cameras and I will bring, film, and we can talk about it. And they will bring me, the views of the city, because Joso is not the city that I live. It's a city that is around 15 kilometers from here. I live in Tsukuba, where Tsukuba University is. And so that was a very interesting opportunity for me to try for like pushing that they will take lead on this. So my work is actually practice led. So although I did had a plan, I always try to be super flexible with it. And from the first time that we actually did a photo walk as a community, and it was with the Brazilian community, they actually told me from the beginning, you know what? We are going to show you the city. And like inside myself, I was screaming of happiness, because that was exactly what I wanted and I wish to happen. And I didn't need to put any effort. And I was like, yeah, please show me, teach me. And it was so interesting from the beginning. The relationship will change over time from that point of view also. And so yeah, I think it was not only discovering different point of views, different experiences of the city, of the migrant experience, but also understanding community, because when you're outside of Peru or any of the Latin American countries, we are Latinos, Latinas, Latinx, outside. But within these communities, we have our own cultures and traditions and dialects, so I was very weary to put them all together, although mainly the people in Joso are from Brazil and Peru. But something that kind of like struck with me, it was it was easier to create community between, for example, Peruvians and Brazilians. So I learned that a lot of Peruvians prefer to learn Portuguese before learning Japanese, because it was the easiest and fastest way to be part of a bigger community. And I thought that was so interesting. And that made me understood why, for example, science and visual communication through the city was mainly in Portuguese, even though there were a lot of Spanish-speaking people there, and that made sense to me. So yeah, as you mentioned, Justin, I think this started like, okay, I'm going to do research in this community on this place, but besides that, and I think this is important, like engaging as a visual researcher, like, yeah, it changed me also, like my point of view and the way I understand this, not only the visual communication, but getting to understand better the community and my own community as well here, So I think this is still going on. I still keep in touch with some of my then participants, now friends, So I thought that was a very interesting evolution in our relationship and in our way to engage with photomedia in that sense. And you mentioned also something like the 3 dimensions of visual literacy, something like that, I think.
I think I was trying to formulate a connection between, you have the 2-dimension, I mean, photographs are 2-dimensional.
Yeah.
And so you're playing with this idea of collaging and putting together and mending of photos, but then you have a 3rd dimension or even a 4th dimensional of the human being having this spiritual or cognitive or relational mending or moving or putting together. That's what I was curious about.
Yeah, I haven't thinking.
And it might even be with yourself.
Yeah. I never thought about it as a 4th dimension. But yeah, so part of this collective photomontage was because even though we did photo walks together as a group, as community, many times with different people in different languages, mainly Spanish and Portuguese, still at the end of the day, when I started photomontaging, like trying to make creative sense of it, very trying to understand and to, mend my memories, my idea of landscape, I realize, okay, but now I'm having conversations within myself, and this won't work in the same way. So I think having that flexibility through the research through this period of time, also it was very helpful for me and for the research. So that's when I invited them again, like, would you like to use the photos that we made together, and let's create something together. And I really like not giving directions in that sense. So some of my work was there, some other things were just, the messiness of a studio. And we started to not only create, but I'm also very interested in the conversations that happen when we collaborate. When we walk through the city making photographs, when we cut and paste and fold, when we have this peer-to-peer sort of thing going on. So they won't even ask me things necessarily, as this hierarchy that sometimes happen in research. They will talk among them, and it was very interesting to me how they also develop relationships within them. So people that were living in the same city because of work engagements or time poverty, as we all have nowadays, they never had the opportunity to meet before. Even I had the situation of 3 women in one of my photo walks. They all work in the same company, and they have never met before, and they met during the photo walk. And I thought that was so interesting. you know, the community that began in that space also, you know, so it kind of expanded our idea of a Latin American community in the city for them and for me, and how working together, you know, together is a word that I really like, because it's not like working with me or me with them, it's together. Um, really trying to be as horizontal as it can be. I do not claim that this has like perfect horizontality, because I think it will be impossible. I arrived there with a purpose, but this is something that I'm really trying to engage and be aware of this, of how we create these relationships and how they influence the work that we create or not.
So, um, what I really like about what you said is that you discovered how to build a community, but also you were discovering photography as a research method. But I am wondering, what was the main challenge that you remember now from your what was the main challenge for for this method?
So thank you for that. So I think getting participants, and at the beginning I wasn't sure what the reason was. I was making flyers in Spanish, in Portuguese, in Japanese, in English, and nothing was happening online. And then I realized that, as I mentioned before, because I'm coming from academia, my idea of working schedule was very different than most of the people there. So Joso is a place that is in Ibaraki Prefecture. It's an eastern prefecture in Japan, and the main, you know, economic activity, it's agriculture, and then there are also a lot of factories. So of course, you know, the working schedule per week was going to be absolutely different. So I needed to give more options during the weekends. You know, I was like, okay, maybe, you know, at the beginning, okay, maybe Saturday morning, you know, because I didn't work, you know, in that moment, and you realize, oh my God, my privilege is not letting me see other things. But it was through failure to get participants that I learned that. So I had a couple of people interested in that, and they contacted me, and they were very transparent, and they're like, I'm interested in this, but it's impossible because, you know, I work on Saturdays. Can you do this on Sunday, or the other way around? So I started to offer options, and and because I have also a limit capacity to offer cameras to people, I was using, because I'm in charge of the photo studio and the darkrooms of the university, I was able to bring those cameras and you know, offer this to them. So I couldn't make you know, a photo walk for 20 people because that was impossible for me. And so I started like, if I have 2 people per day, that will be okay. And I can only have, you know, 6 people tops. So I started offering also separated. So some in Portuguese and some workshops in Spanish, you know. So kind of like that, because people felt more comfortable not needing to switch from one language to the other. Um, Even though they could be friendly, you know, working and having fluid conversations, it was, you know, kind of that sense of home in a way. Um, so that was that. And I think that was one of the biggest challenge at the beginning, but it was me, you know, it was that I wasn't very aware at that time of people's time working in a different field than I was. So that, and then also, well, some things that I discovered with that, you know, women, like most of my participants were women, and then having a conversation after that with the director of the Overseas Japanese Migration Museum, he told me that in his experience working with Latin American communities, women were mostly the, you know, the force, the source of creating community. And I thought that was very interesting, because from that, people were sharing things like, you know, keeping the language at home, I was taking notes, of course, and I thought that was very interesting. People were also looking for a space that wasn't work related to meet new people and to talk about, daily life. Yeah.
I wonder, Marita. I think in anyone that's doing a research project or building something or having a question of inquiry, usually there's some unexpected result or unexpected experience that you didn't plan for, which is what I'm hearing that happened with you. So could you walk us through anything that stands out for you as far as how you were transformed unexpectedly through this process, and the participants were transformed, or the project itself was transformed in the world in a way that you didn't expect?
Okay. So I think one of the things that surprised me the most from the beginning of the research is because I started making these photo walks by myself at first. So I did like maybe 3 photo walks by myself before understanding that, the important need of having people walking with me.
Mm.
And during these 3 first photo walks, I noticed that a lot of the visual communication of the city that was in Portuguese was very different. If you have a sign in 4 languages, it was Japanese, English, Mandarin, and Portuguese. So the Japanese one said a very different thing from my point of view, at least, than the Portuguese one. So the one in Portuguese was more like, you are forbid to do this, kind of like very, very direct, very, do not mess this up. And the one in Japanese was like so, sweet. And so there's a difference in saying, please remember to bring your trash here, and then, right, it's forbidden to put your trash. So I thought that was a kind of strong way to communicate with your foreign communities. And I thought that that might be considered offensive, there are not a few of this style of signs. And I thought, okay, here is kind of like the meat of the things, people against, government or communities, and they couldn't be less interested in that. Like they couldn't care less. They were like, okay, whatever. Yeah, we get it. We need to keep the city clean. And they weren't feeling any sense of discomfort. And I was like, okay, so this is not a problem at all. Maybe I was being oversensitive, or because I don't live here, or, but they were interested in different things that I didn't notice. For example, public policy. And that it's something that I will love to engage in future research. But, the story of the visual communication or the city communication in Portuguese here comes from actually a disaster experience, So like around 10 years ago, there was no visual communication or communication in itself in another language that wasn't Japanese or maybe even English, until, it was a flooding from one of the rivers there. And in that time, communication was only in Japanese. So the most affected communities were the ones that weren't fluent in Japanese. And this was, for example, the Brazilian and the rest of the Latin American communities there. So this was a response to that. So the feeling that the community has, at least from my experience with the participants, that I wasn't aware of, that I have, to my knowledge, never have read information about, that was that although visual communication is there and maybe is not as friendly as they would wish to, it wasn't relevant in comparison, to the work that, the city hall, the municipality will make towards them. So that really not shocked me, but, it was a new thing for me to learn in that sense, because we tend to think that maybe the experience was smooth in terms of, safety and integration, because most of the Brazilian community here and also from the Peruvian are from Japanese descent. They are Nikkei. So some of them will have some level of Japanese ability in that sense. So that was new to learn. And I wouldn't have known it if I didn't walk the walk with them, So yeah, that was, it makes you rethink your position as a research and the things that will get your attention and the things we think are important versus the ones that are really important for the community that we are working with. So yeah, in that sense, I think I can keep going, but I think that was one of the ones because I was so sure that was going to be a really important part of the research, and it really wasn't in that sense.
Thank you very much for being here. Muchas gracias por aceptar nuestra invitación. Una pregunta. You're about to become a doctor. ¿Qué sigue para ti en tu investigación? ¿Cuál es el siguiente paso?
Pues muchas gracias, Ricardo, y la verdad que lindo poder tener una pregunta en español, especialmente ahora que vamos a estar en México este año. Y bueno, yo sigo muy interesada en seguir trabajando temas de alfabetización visual. Yo he estado conectada con educación muchísimo tiempo, he trabajado en universidades en Perú por más de una década y luego aquí también. Y me interesa algo en lo que estoy mirando mucho ahora es cómo las comunidades migrantes son representadas desde los fotomedios, ¿no? Desde la fotografía y cómo son representadas sobre todo por alguien que no es parte de la comunidad, ¿no? Entonces tenemos ejemplos de barrios en los que hay un grupo específico, ¿no? Barrios kurdos, barrios latinos, barrios chinos, vietnamitas. Y sobre todo en estos tiempos creo que el contexto político es relevante, que muchas veces encontramos tantas historias de terror relacionadas a nosotros los migrantes, que creo que es súper relevante observar cómo es que se presentan esas imágenes, qué es lo que se está diciendo y lo que no se está diciendo, ¿no? Entonces, me gustaría seguir trabajando con comunidades y por supuesto que las comunidades latinoamericanas van a seguir siendo un foco súper importante para mí, lo van a ser siempre, pero me gustaría poder expandir y entender si nuestra situación es la misma. Supongo que no, yo estoy partiendo por la idea de que probablemente no lo sea, ¿no? Y entender cómo estamos siendo representados y cuál sería una forma más justa, más honesta, más transparente de representar a nuestras propias comunidades, ¿no? Y creo que eso ayudaría mucho, además, a ver, un granito de arena y para seguir siendo parte de todo de toda esta gran movida de investigación en migración, desde lo visual, además, poder seguir expandiendo el conocimiento sobre lo que aportamos las comunidades migrantes en los países que nos acogen, ¿no? Y poder cruzar más allá de los estereotipos que existen en todas partes, en todos los países del mundo. No, y es eso, un granito de arena y poder seguir trabajando desde lo visual y con y por la comunidad. Muchas gracias.
Excelente, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Marita, and felicidades on your project that you're working on and all the visual things that you're talking about and continuing to work on. And for everyone watching, thank you for being with us, and we hope that you will join us in October through the beginning of November for our conference coming up in Aguascalientes, Mexico, exploring the power of images in sacred and festive spaces. And registration is still open, and we hope you can join us. And we will be back with another talk soon, so we hope that we will see you there and explore your world in a visual way. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.